Imagine that you fall asleep, and when you wake up you find yourself lost in the middle of the sea, all because of a sudden storm. As you explore the area, you notice that sharks are surrounding you from every direction. How would you save yourself? And to find out what happened, come along and let's watch the film The Requin. The film's story begins with Jilin and her husband Kyle. We learn that Jilin had a miscarriage and went through a very difficult emotional state. Kyle, wanting to help change her mindset, takes her on a trip around the landmarks of Vietnam. Later, the producer takes them to a coastal area made of wooden docks. There, Jilin sits in the cafeteria and calls her mother. Her mother is worried about her, but Jilin reassures her by saying she's fine. Meanwhile, Kyle is playing football with some friends. After her mother hangs up the call, the news spreads that a storm is coming to Vietnam. That night, everyone is warned to be careful because the storm is expected. However, Jilin doesn't understand much since the news was in Vietnamese. Then we see them walking along the coast as they head to the cabin they booked by the shore. Kyle goes into the sea to swim, but Jilin is preoccupied with her phone because there is no internet connection. At that moment, Kyle tells her that they came here to enjoy themselves and urges her to leave her phone and all worldly concerns behind and join him in the sea. She initially refuses out of fear, but Kyle insists that she come down so they can enjoy their time together. Eventually, she puts her phone aside and joins him in the water. They begin to swim together, diving into the depths of the sea and marveling at the beauty of nature and the diverse marine life. Suddenly, Kyle spots a rock in the middle of the sea, climbs onto it, and calls Jilin to join him. At that moment, his leg slips, and he injures himself on the rock. When she goes to him, she sees blood mixing with the water. Terrified, she recalls the moment when she lost her baby. Kyle begins to calm her down, saying that it wasn't meant for their child to live, but she starts crying as he speaks in such a way and apologizes to her. Later, they are in the wooden cabin. Jilin sees clouds in the distance and tells Kyle that she wants to return to their homeland. He agrees to her wish and tells her that the next day they will go back. He takes her to the bed so they can sleep and rest. In the middle of the night, they are awakened by the sound of rain and thunder, but Kyle reassures Jilin, saying it's just some rain that will soon pass. At that moment, they receive a call from the resort services checking on Kyle and his wife. They inform them that a light thunderstorm is approaching and advise them not to worry, suggesting that if they want to, they can go inside the resort for safety. However, Jilin refuses to leave the cabin. After the call ends, they go back to sleep. Suddenly, they wake up to the force of a storm that shatters the cabin's windows and shakes the cabin in the water, because of the chain that was holding the cabin. The cabin, which once served its purpose, is now adrift in the sea. Jilin tries to reach for her phone to call for help. But the storm is too strong and the seawater has disabled the phone. Meanwhile, due to the powerful shaking of the cabin, Kyle is struck and his leg is broken. Looking out the window, they see that they are now very far from the resort, with the winds pulling them further into the sea. No one is paying attention to them, and no one knows what is happening. They try calling out, but to no avail. Kyle then suggests to Jilin that they leave the cabin and continue swimming, hoping to reach the resort safely. He tells her they should do this before the cabin drifts even further into the sea. Jilin is very frightened and terrified, and she refuses the idea. But Kyle continues to encourage her to get into the water with him. Finally, he helps her down from the cabin through a window, although she is extremely scared and needs his support. She even asks him to pull her back into the cabin. At that moment, a wave brings the cabin close to a large rock, with Jilin caught between the cabin and the rock. Before the wave can crash the cabin against the rock, Kyle lets go of Jilin's hands and pushes her into the sea so she would not be hurt. The cabin then hits the rock and is destroyed. Quickly, she climbs out of the sea and onto the rock, then returns to the cabin where she hugs Kyle, who is already injured from the cut on his leg. Jilin then suggests that they get out of the cabin and stand on the rock until the storm passes. She reasons that if they stayed in the cabin, the storm might carry them even further away. But Kyle tells her that the cabin is anchored to the rock and he cannot leave because of his injury, so they are safe inside the cabin until help arrives. They remain in the cabin for one day, and when they wake up the next morning, they are shocked to see that they have drifted very far from the resort, with water in every direction. They are in the middle of the sea. At that point, Jilin is furious with Kyle and accuses him, saying that everything happened because of him, and that if they had been on the rock, someone might have come to save them. Now, there is no one to rescue them, and they have no means of communication. Soon after, Jilin is seen swimming in the sea. She finds 2 water bottles, gives one to Kyle, and then dives back to collect their suitcases. At that moment, she notices a group of fish attempting to attack her, so she quickly returns to the cabin. Kyle finds his phone, but it is dead. They remain in the cabin, hoping that someone will come to rescue them. During this time, one of the water bottles reflects the strong sunlight onto Kyle's leg, burning it. After a while, Jilin sees an airplane flying over the sea and tries to signal for help, but no one notices. The sunlight had already been reflected by the water bottle. By the time they tried to reflect it again, it was sunset and the sunlight was too weak, causing their plan to fail. Then darkness falls and they sleep. When they wake up in the morning, they see a ship far away. They call out, but again, no one hears them. They try to light a fire to create smoke and attract attention, but everything seems to work in reverse, and no one notices them. Meanwhile, their cabin is burning. In the end, Kyle and Jilin save themselves at the last moments by throwing themselves into the sea, though they cannot see their burning cabin. Later, they are rescued by holding onto a small piece of wood left from the cabin. Looking out the window, they see large shark fins nearby. Kyle goes into the sea to see what is happening, while Jilin finds a large wooden board, which she drifts toward him and climbs on. Suddenly, the sharks start to get closer and closer. Jilin, frightened, tries to approach Kyle to pull him, as he is bleeding from his leg due to being cut by a shark. At that point, a group of dolphins appears and they rest on the wood for a moment. But suddenly, a real shark attacks, severing the piece of wood that was connecting them, and also flipping over the board on which Kyle is lying, causing him to fall into the sea. Jilin quickly gets off the board and grabs a piece of wood, beginning to hit the shark. However, she is stunned when she sees water mixing with blood. She manages to return and climb back onto the board, while Kyle is able to get around in the water. Jilin continues to try and pull him, but she cannot, and Kyle remains clinging to the wood. We learn that the shark has cut off his leg. Jilin then tries to swim away on the board, away from the sharks, until she becomes exhausted and falls asleep. They both sleep, with the wood floating on its own. During the night, Jilin wakes up startled when she sees that they are on the shore. She quickly goes to Kyle and starts shaking him awake, but unfortunately, it is too late. Kyle is dead due to the bleeding from his severed leg. Jilin continues trying to revive him, terrified at the thought of being alone. After she grows too tired, she lies down on the sand. Then, she has a dream in which Kyle appears, walking toward her and telling her that she is strong and must carry on. But she tells him that he must remain with her, that she cannot continue without him. He replies that he will always be by her side. Suddenly, she wakes up, realizing that it was just a dream and that she must continue her journey alone if she is to survive. At that moment, morning arrives, and she finds herself alone on the shore. Kyle's body was taken away by a wave and pulled into the sea. Nearby, she sees a shark near Kyle's body, and a wave tries to pull Jilin into the sea, but she stands firm and attempts to return to the shore. The shark keeps trying to approach her. While Jilin makes progress, she accidentally steps on a piece of glass and falls, and the shark moves closer, attempting to bite her leg. But Jilin does not give up at all. She clutches a stone in her hand and starts hitting the shark on its head until it leaves her and swims away. Shortly after, she leaves and walks along the shore, tearing her t-shirt and grabbing a piece of cloth in an attempt to bandage her wounded leg. When exhaustion overwhelms her, she falls asleep on the shore once more. When she wakes up, she sees a mountain ahead and decides to climb it to see what lies on the other side. From the top, she spots a boat in the middle of the sea with a sleeping fisherman inside. She calls out to him, but he does not hear her because he is asleep. Jilin then swims towards the boat and climbs aboard. Exhausted and very thirsty, she finds a large bottle of water and drinks from it. Soon after, she vomits, realizing that it wasn't water but alcohol. This wakes the fisherman, and she tries to explain what happened. She also shows the fisherman the shark bite on her leg, but he doesn't understand her because their languages are different. Still, he holds her and tries to dress her wound, even sewing it with the fishing hook he has. After disinfecting the wound with alcohol, he finishes stitching and bandaging it. Soon after, exhausted, Jilin falls asleep, and the fisherman leaves her on the boat. He then goes back into the sea to pull up the net that is used for fishing and to retrieve the weight that anchors the boat. At that moment, Jilin wakes up from a strong jolt on the boat. She becomes even more frightened when she can't find the fisherman beside her, and she starts calling out for him. Then she sees the fisherman's hand with blood floating on the sea, and we learn that the grouper shark attacked him. She is extremely terrified and tries to pull the rope that is attached to the weight, which holds the boat in place. But she can't do it alone. Suddenly, the fisherman appears again, still alive, and extends his hand to pull her, but as he does so, he pulls her into the sea. However, she does not understand his language. We learn that the fisherman wanted her help to free the weight because he couldn't do it with one hand alone, but she misunderstood him. Instead, she goes swimming and returns to the boat once more. The fisherman appears again as she tries to pull him into the boat, but unfortunately a shark shows up and devours him. Jilin, in a state of panic, grabs the rope and manages to pull the weight into the boat. Suddenly, another shark appears, approaching the boat very fast. Quickly, she turns on the manual motor on the boat, which helps move it. She takes control and directs the boat toward the shark, causing the shark to get hurt and retreat. However, the shark is not satisfied and returns even faster toward the boat. When Jilin tries to restart the motor, it fails. The shark then strikes the boat with great speed, capsizing it in the sea. The weight sinks to the depths and becomes fixed. Jilin tries to pull herself up with her legs, but to no avail. As the shark gets closer to her, Jilin manages to move the weight and hurl it at the shark's mouth. The shark swallows the weight and dies. Then the shark starts descending into the depths, pulling the boat that is tied with a rope into the sea. Jilin manages to cut the rope at the last moment and frees the boat. She then rights the boat and climbs aboard, spotting a nearby area where several fishermen are present. She calls out to them until they finally see her, and she is overjoyed. She sleeps and rests in the boat until, finally, the fishermen arrive. After enduring all these hardships and dangers, she manages to return to land once again. And don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell.